Hello, everyone. Glad you could join us again. Today, I've got a good interview here. It's going to talk about a bill that was passed in the state of Tennessee that means a lot to a lot of folks, and some may call us conspiracy theorists, but uh, I think you'll understand more what it's all about when Danielle gets to talking about it. So we were able to get this through, get bill sponsors for it, and get it signed by the governor. So Danielle, welcome. This is Danielle Goodrich. She's from the Johnson City area. So Danielle, welcome and tell us about this bill.
Hi, Charles. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. Yep. So I've been on your show before, and just
Yes.
to give people a quick recap. So I got started in the medical freedom side of things when Democrat Congressman Adam Schiff asked big tech to censor two topics, and nobody thought it was a big deal then. And then COVID hit and the censorship just snowballed. I started a freedom group. It was called Johnson City Freedom at the time. And we've recently rebranded to East Tennessee Freedom to include more. But we focus on state sovereignty, 10th Amendment issues, the Constitution, and ensuring those who are elected understand the Constitution. So during COVID, we realized that people didn't know what an inalienable right was. So how could the elected who hold an oath to it uphold something that they don't even know how to articulate? So we started having these classes, and we had our senator, representatives, mayors, sheriffs, et cetera, all out to have Constitution classes. And we started to educate the area too, so that when we saw them stepping outside of the Constitution, or if we see the federal government stepping outside of the 18 enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8, that we see that. And so during COVID, we realized it wasn't just medical freedom. We realized it was freedom. And if you know the 8 steps from walking a country out of freedom and into communism, then you know take control of healthcare, control the people is just the first step, followed by some other steps. And we're seeing all of these steps happen in our country now. But today I'm on to talk about a geoengineering ban that we got passed. It was HB 2063, SB 2691, and it looks to ban geoengineering in forms of weather modification and solar radiation modification. And Governor Lee did recently sign it. Basically, the legacy media, they first attacked the legislation as conspiracy theory. And then as the proof kind of started to become undeniable, the hearings were so interesting for this because we had federal documents that we could point to. We had a White House congressional document, which is titled, "Its Congressionally Mandated Research Plan and Initial Research Governance Framework Related to Solar Radiation Modification." And it gets into different forms of weather modification, like solar radiation modification, which basically means blocking out the sun. So, who thought that was a good idea? So yeah, they're not thinking about the unintended consequences, which they actually highlighted in the document. They also had solar aerosol injections and other aerosol injection practices. And so the Democrats were saying this is all conspiracy theory. And when they were voting on it on the House floor, they did this whole skit about how it was Sasquatch and it's ridiculous. And yet here we were able to show federal documents. We were able to show appropriations and funding. We were able to show that weather modification actually already existed in Tennessee Code Annotated under the governor's emergency authority. In 2020, they added that he has authority over weather modification in Tennessee under his emergency authority. So while we were, paying attention to COVID, and we know that his emergency authority is a problem, but, here it is in Tennessee code, and they're trying to say it doesn't exist. And the icing on the cake was that a young guy, his name was Augustus Dorico from El Segundo, California, who owns a weather modification company called Rainmaker, and he specializes in cloud seeding. So adding chemicals to the clouds for increased precipitation. He came out and testified against the legislation. And here you have the Democrats still saying it's conspiracy theory when you had all of this proof in front of them.
Wow.
But the reason why we took this on was because we see this similarly to the issue that we see with COVID. So with COVID, what happened? In 2017, they lifted a moratorium on experimenting and weaponizing viruses. They said that there was going to be a pandemic. A virus was released. They blamed us for breathing and then started infringing on our rights.
Yes.
And so now, with this supposed climate crisis, they were not a signatory in a international ban on geoengineering and solar radiation modification practices in the United States. They took the opposite approach. They have a congressionally mandated research plan saying that they're going to mandate solar radiation modification. So it's the same thing. They're experimenting with weather, telling us that we're going to have severe weather, blaming us for breathing because we're dirty carbon emitters that used to be dirty germ emitters. And now they're looking to infringe on our rights. And so we look at this as a 10th Amendment issue because you have the federal government saying that they're going to experiment on us without our consent, and they weren't delegated the authority over weather modification. So our argument was, this is a 10th Amendment issue. We have to tell the federal government that, A, Tennesseans don't consent to these types of experiments on our weather or in our skies, which is inadvertently experimenting on us. And B, they don't have the delegated authority to do it in Article 1, Section 8, or in the 18 enumerated powers. So that's, we saw this congressional document. We knew we had proof to prove that there was funding, that it's already in Tennessee code. And we looked at this as an opportunity to begin a conversation around the experiments that they're doing in our skies without our consent and without the delegated authority. And that's really what this legislation was about, was the state of Tennessee claiming governance over something that is a states' rights issue.
Yeah. And so the sponsors of this bill, they're not known for their tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist legislators. I mean, these I know the senator Steve Sutherland that carried this bill. He's not like that at all, and so for him to pick this bill up and carry it, it says a lot about what was learned about what was going on with this.
Yeah, it was a process that we started back in November, and this should really be a lesson to anybody who's listening. You don't have to, be an expert in the legislature to get something done, to make something happen, and to make a difference. You just need to, be able to meet with some legislators, tell them the issue, and give them enough proof where it's believable. And, the media keeps trying to say that this doesn't exist, but we have more and more evidence. And now the media is almost having to try to, they're having to kind of backpedal a little bit and change their direction, where now they're trying, and we saw this on the House floor too, because Justin Jones, Representative Justin Jones, he just stuck with this is conspiracy theory, even though there's all this proof. But some of the other Democrats, the more proof that we had, they started to change their narrative to, okay, but is this good for climate change? And that's what we're seeing out of the mainstream media now, where they're starting to shift their narrative, where it was, this is conspiracy theory, this isn't happening, to, well, yeah, the technology exists, there's patents for this, they could do it, but they're not doing it yet, to, okay, well, they're doing it somewhat, but it's not large scale, it's only, in certain places. And so they've had to shift their narrative. And it's not just Tennessee who's entered legislation. There's several other states. You had our neighbor in Kentucky, they introduced HB 506. You had Rhode Island, they introduced a Clean Air Preservation Act. You had New Hampshire enter a Clean Atmosphere Preservation Act. Illinois entered the Weather Modification Act. South Dakota entered its own legislation. Minnesota, Connecticut, and I know there's more states that are jumping on now, but Tennessee was the first one to successfully pass the legislation.
fantastic. Good job on what y'all did here, and I was able to send a few emails and help with it, but you guys did the work on it, and that's fantastic. So it, it will help bring um, more notice to stuff like this of what's going on, and we know that they do this kind of stuff, and you can go back to the 50s and find out some of the things that they've done, but the more research that they do to try to change things, and we know that's what scientists do.
Hmm.
But we have to be careful what we're allowing to be put into our atmosphere to do tests. We don't know the effects of this stuff and what's going to happen, and so I think it's fantastic work that y'all did. So tell me a little bit more about the bill. Um, what kind of enforcement mechanisms or anything like that? What's the punishment? What needs to take place from here?
Yeah, so the next steps, so New Hampshire's legislation, New Hampshire 1700, they had a real strong enforcement mechanism. In some of these other states, they had a stronger enforcement mechanism. And I do have to give credit to Jolie Diane, who was behind the scenes. She's from Zero Geoengineering, and she helped tremendously. The lady is a wealth of information. She's actually somebody you should have on, Charles, because she's just brilliant.
Okay.
And it's we're going to be having more of these conversations, and I'll get into something in a minute. But we weren't able to get an enforcement mechanism added this time around, and the reason for that was because it would have carried a fiscal note. And so all of the legislation that was carrying a fiscal note or had a budget attached to it was being put behind the budget and was killed. So Senator Nicely on the Senate floor, while this bill was being heard, he even said, he turned to Senator Sutherland and he was like, this really needs some teeth to it. This needs an enforcement mechanism. And Senator Sutherland was like, yeah, but if we add that this year, it's going to get killed. And this is a problem that we have to address in Tennessee. We can't keep passing laws that don't have enforcement mechanisms just because the governor has a big bloated budget where he's adding things that maybe aren't best for Tennesseans, so that, now we can't even pass legislation or laws with enforcement. I do think that that's something that needs to be addressed, but that is our goal for next legislative session. We would like to see an enforcement mechanism that's added to this, similar to what we're seeing in some of these other states where they did enter their legislation with enforcement. None of those have passed yet, so we can't, point to it and say, let's do it just like this, because it's just at this stage, it's just a bill, it's not law. But that is part of our goal for next legislative session. And the issue's becoming even more complicated than that, because now we just had another congressional, you got to keep an eye on this, on all the congressional acts that come out, because it comes with federal dollars and the state wants the federal dollars. And
Yes.
so, you got things like the Inflation Reduction Act, which says it's about reducing an inflation. But if you read the act, it's all about this climate crisis and energy. And what they're doing is hurting our economy, not helping inflation, because when they limit our gas and our natural resources, then it drives up the price of everything else, of our fertilizer, of our farmers' ability to produce and drive food in every market. And so all the acts that they have at the federal level really do the opposite of what they say they're going to do. And so something to keep an eye on, it's called S3888, Artificial Intelligence, Surveillance, and Weather. And it's a recent act that just passed, and it's about using artificial intelligence with this type of weather modification, geoengineering. And you know how the left always is constantly changing the lingo and the words that they use. So it's like, once we catch on to the fact that it's called geoengineering, they change it to solar radiation modification. Once we catch on to the fact that it's called solar radiation modification, now they're starting to try to put it under weather forecasting, and they're trying to, say it's modeling. So we're just looking at weather modeling or experimentation, so that it sounds more benign. than modification.
Constant rebranding.
Yes, and that's what they're doing. But this most recent, the S3888, I mean, you're talking about using artificial intelligence, and some of what they use for this system, they're using satellites as the space-based infrastructure. They're using our towers and antennas as the ground-based infrastructure for surveillance of the weather. But they're also using it as a part of this whole infrastructure. And so this S3888 to mandate the use, this is what it says, to mandate the use of artificial intelligence by federal agencies to adapt to extreme weather and for other purposes. And so, I mean, now you have it. So if they're able to do weather modification and they're leaving it up to artificial intelligence, then there's nobody to hold accountable. Right. So if they cloud seed one area and it causes a flood, oh, it was just artificial intelligence. You know, they just had the numbers off. And so this will be part of the next conversation that we have with the legislators is, you know, how are we going to either amend or add additional law to account for the use of artificial intelligence now in this infrastructure.
Yeah, and then they once the flooding happens and everything, they'll say it's climate change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was all caused by climate change. We even seen one of the Democratic House members in Washington say the eclipse was caused by climate change.
Yep.
Wow. You know, this is how, I got to choose my words correctly here. This is how ridiculous they are.
Yep.
That's the nicest way I can put it.
Yeah, there's a story right now that's out of Dubai, and Bloomberg was reporting that they were cloud seeding out there. And now they're having the heaviest rainfall in 75 years to the point where it caused flooding. The good news is that it is out there, you know, through Bloomberg, that there was cloud seeding involved in this. Mm-hmm. I'm sure a lot of the legacy media is going to spin that and say that's conspiracy theory. There's no proof of this. But
from Bloomberg?
Yeah.
Bloomberg?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I'll have to try to find it. I'll try to send it to you, but somebody sent it to me this morning. And
yeah, I'm saying, but they're going to blame Bloomberg for conspiracy theories?
I know.
Yeah, wow.
I mean,
that'd be
well, you'll get
blaming CNN for it.
Yeah, that's right. You'll see they use confusion to gaslight the public. Yes. So you'll see, you know, all different spins. Yeah. So, you know, the people who call us conspiracy theorists can be like, look, see, they're wrong. Yeah. But yeah, so this is a conversation that I think it's great that we got started in Tennessee. And it's definitely a conversation that's not over, because we're seeing the results of it. And Representative Ritchie, he brought up a great point in one of the House hearings where the gentleman, Augustus Dorico, the owner of Rainmaker, was talking. And so Ritchie was like, well, where are you doing most of your cloud seeding? And Dorico was like, well, you know, out west, and I'm in California. And he's like, so where you're doing it is where we're seeing most of the wildfires and a lot of this drought and issue. And he's like, we don't want that coming to Tennessee. The problem is it's already here. It's already everywhere. And, you know, we're just going to really have to try to get that enforcement mechanism passed, so that we do see a change. I kind of want to temper people's expectations after July when this does pass, because I don't expect it to stop the federal government from experimenting. I expect this to be a first step to these conversations, and that we're going to probably have to have, you know, an enforcement mechanism added next legislative session, starting in January before we see it stopped. I do think it will stop these little guys like Augustus Dorico of a small company like Rainmaker, but I don't think it's going to stop the big guys.
So, and let's make sure we clear this up. It was actually passed and signed by the governor. The law goes into effect in July, correct?
Correct.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, and the federal government, those tied to the federal government, will still do what they want to do, but hopefully it will slow it down until we can get more enforcement and teeth to the law.
Yes, that's the hope. So stay tuned. Next legislative session, help us get the word out that we need to advocate. Once we have bill numbers, I'll send it your way, and hopefully we can get that enforcement mechanism added.
Good deal. All right, fantastic work on this bill and getting it done. Future generations may be looking back on this and saying, "Wow, I'm glad this got done."
Yeah.
We don't know what they saved us from. So anyway, well, Danielle, I thank you for joining me today on here. You got anything else you want to add before we finish this up?
Yeah, we are helping out to support. There's a TPUSA Faith event there's actually two of them. There's one May 17th, which is a pastors and faith leaders luncheon that's going to be here at University Parkway Baptist, which I'd invite all the pastors and faith leaders who are watching to watch this. They're going to be discussing biblical worldview, declining biblical literacy, and how that affects cultural issues, and how the Bible advises us on every aspect of life, and how our Constitution was built around the Bible. It was the most referenced document of our founding fathers. So they have an issue, they have a event to deal with cultural issues on May 17th, and then May 18th. Calvary Chapel, along with TPUSA Faith, is doing an event in downtown Johnson City, which is called Jesus Fast, and that's family friendly. That's for everybody, and that's on May 18th. So I'd say, just look online for those two events. Send your pastors and your faith leaders to the first one, and send your family and all your friends to the one on May 18th.
Good deal. All right. Hopefully we can do that and get more recognition to it and more focus on it. All right. Well, I thank you for joining me today and talking about this issue. I know there'll be more come about it in the next coming sessions. So thank you so much, and thank everybody for watching this, and please share it and bring more attention to this issue. With
Yes.
that, I say thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.